by 10 seconds. Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2, 1. Mark.
It's that time again. How we doing? Switch over. Today we're going to be talking about common shaming tactics that women use on men, also that men use on men. You're going to like today. It's going to be a fun one. Very useful information coming up. How'd you like that, huh? There we go. Give me 1 second and greetings. How are we doing today, guys? Hello, 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 hello. Thought I'd go with the trucker hat today. I'm experimenting with new sounds. I played that from the computer today. I didn't play that from the board, but I had to go through the board. So let's see how it works. I've noticed that if I play from the board, that it kind of after a little while, for whatever reason, the audio kind of gets a little low on the volume. So anyways, how we doing, guys? It is Wednesday, April 1st. I promise you there will be no April Fool's jokes today. Everything will be actionable intelligence, actionable information that you've come to expect from me and my books and everything else. How's that? Okay. Thank you guys for waiting. I noticed there was a lot of people waiting this time. Probably because you're all trapped inside your homes again, huh? Yeah. I guess we're now waiting on to the end of the month. We got it extended. It's no longer no longer going to be a Passover event, right? It's now going to be an end of the month event. I don't know what's going to happen once we get out. Are there things you guys are like missing right now? Probably. I don't know. Like there's certain things like I would really like to go have sushi right now. I'm kind of like the guy that has to have sushi like once a month, like get my sushi fix or whatever. Here in Reno, we have literally, and I'm not making this up, we have 30 all-you-can-eat sushi restaurants throughout like the Reno area. And into Sparks and some other, the surrounding areas as well. And it's got to be killing some of these businesses right now. And I feel for them, but it is what it is. So in the meantime, what are you guys doing? What are you guys doing in the in your forced exile, I guess? Let me close that one out, and there we go. Now I'm in. All right, guys. So yeah, tomorrow's my birthday. I was going to do a live show. I've decided not to. I'm going to do a recorded show because I'm going to finally take my sled up the hill. I can't imagine anything more socially isolating than being on my sled at the top of Mount Rose, which is overlooking Lake Tahoe on my birthday. It's a nice day out. It's supposed to be a nice day tomorrow. So what the hell? If they're going to fine me, I'll be happy to pay the fine at this point. Yeah, thank you very much, guys. I'm gonna also just let you guys know, because I fail to do this at the beginning of every show, but I want to let you know how the super chats work for this particular stream when I do Rollo solo, which is what you're getting today, and actually pretty much in every cast that I do. If you have a on-topic super chat, unlike this one, if you have an on-topic super chat, if you have a question, if it's pertaining to what we're talking about, I usually get to those like immediately. If I don't, or if you have an off-topic question, whatever, comment, I'm happy to answer those. I just usually do those towards the end of the show, which is like usually the last 20 or 30 minutes. I also have I have I have Sam Bada is in the house. He is in the chat. He is moderating at least the YouTube side of things for me. So big ups to Mr. Bada today. He is actually the voice of the Rational Male. He does all the narration of my books, and will be doing the narration of book 4, which is something that I wanted to also address before I jump into today's topic. I have really dug back into some of the stuff I've been doing, and I'm kind of glad that I held off this long, because now I think that writing the foreword and the afterword of the book for sure is going to be a little bit more timely, because now it will publish in a post-virus world. So that's kind of why I'm delaying it. The other reason I'm delaying it is because if you've noticed and you've tried to purchase one of my print books right now, the shipping is really delayed because of the virus, because of what's been going on in the whole world right now. I'm not really sure. I know that Amazon, and at least print on demand, some of their stuff comes from the United States, some of it comes from China, I think, and then I know that there's a printing place that's in Poland as well. That's just the printing side of things. There's also the shipping side of things as well. I can't imagine that that the virus is helping things, which of course it's not. So if you were to, like, say, order a print book, like for yourself, or for a friend, it's going to take a little while, probably an extra week, maybe week and a half, at least according to what I am getting from my friends at Amazon. So if you are interested in helping the show out, or if you are interested in getting a book, I would suggest the Kindle book right now, which is actually a little bit less than the print book anyways. But again, it's kind of kicks me in the ass a little bit, because I've always been the guy to stress picking up the print book, even though it's the book that I make the least amount of royalties on, because I want guys to be able to read it and share it and discuss it with their friends and pass it on, kind of thing. It's much nicer to actually have a physical copy in your hands. So I'll let you know when that happens. But again, that's another thing that's delaying everything at this point. So but it's a good thing. It's helping me refine things. It's helping me really sort of dig into the meat of the red pill and religion, which is really what it's about. It's going to be called Religion. I've decided that that's what the title is. I've already reserved it as the ISBN number is already reserved now. So there you have it. That's the updates for me and my living arrangement. It's funny, is as a writer, I spend a lot of time right here in this studio, as a matter of fact, but I spend a lot of time, in front of a computer, in front of sometimes my iPad. If you see me on Twitter, it's usually because I'm on my iPad somewhere. But isolation is not a big deal to me. Sometimes I actually prefer it. I'm kind of a little strange when it comes to are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? I mean, I've always been kind of an extrovert, but like I have introverted like habits, I guess. I've always been an artist. I like to paint things. I like to play, miniature war games. By the way, the other thing I'm going to let you guys know, and I'll make a mention of this at the end of the show as well, is tonight at 6 p.m. Pacific, I believe 9 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be on the Masculine Geek podcast, and we're going to pick up a Dungeons and Dragons game. So if you really want to, geek out with me or the guys, and it's a fun, it's just, we do it for fun, and the conversations that we have as we're playing is actually more, I think more entertaining than the actual adventure itself. So if you guys want to, we do it once a month. So if you are interested, it's coming up tonight. We usually do it midweek, like once a month. So I don't have the link with me right now, but just go look up the Masculine Geek podcast on YouTube, and you'll be able to see it tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern. So there you go. All right, guys. Wow, this is actually a pretty good one. Tiger says, will we see open hypergamy in a post-virus world? You're already seeing it right now. I'm working. I don't know if I should make this a live stream. I might actually do a Friday stream, simply because I'm kind of locked up in here, and I mean, I can go out. I'm actually considering going and doing some spring fly fishing now, but I'm doing things by myself or just with my new dog, by the way. You want to know what I got for my birthday? I got a new greyhound. His name is Ned. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see pictures of Ned on there. I don't have the dog cam set up in here today, but I probably should. I actually now have 2 dog beds in here because Ned is a really great dog. He's probably like waiting right outside the door right now, wondering why he can't get in here. But I did that. The other thing I got also is, and I ordered this for myself. I've been meaning to do this anyways, but I got one of those power tower things where like you can do like a Roman chair and you can do dips and you can do pull-ups and you can do chin-ups. And then it also has like this little thing on the, where you can do like, I guess, push-ups kind of thing. And it's just sort of body weight exercises. The only thing that sucks is you can't really do legs. You can't really do shoulders all that well. So, but it's really cool. I put it together. It's a pain in the ass to put together, but I put it together yesterday. It's out in my yard. I haven't done an outdoor workout in like, since I was like a teenager. So it's kind of funny. Now, just to get to your question really quick before we start, Tiger, I want to do an episode. I'm kind of waiting till things sort of shake out a little bit more with what's going on in the world as far as the virus is concerned. But one of those topics that I'd like to address in a dedicated show is what we can expect, not just from hypergamy, open hypergamy, but also, what the sexual marketplace is going to look like in a post-virus world. I think a lot of people are nervous right now. They're sort of biting their nails with respect to the economy, not to mention, concerns about their own health and everything else. So, and maybe rightfully so, but I'm cautiously collecting information at this point. So look for this topic in an upcoming show. Like I said, I might even do it on Friday as sort of like a special thing. I might do a 1-hour live stream, or I might just do a recorded thing. So watch for that. What else do I have? Anybody? What do you got here? What's your thoughts on women wanting to eat at fancy restaurant? You eat at fancy restaurant. Every woman I've ever dated loved fancy dinners, and cost wouldn't matter. I tell you what's, God damn it, you guys are going to hit me. Okay, you know what? Excuse me, Sam, log this for me. I'll get to this at the end of the show. Arnold. Hey, Arnold. We'll talk about that. That's funny you should ask that, because I just got into sort of a Twitter back and forth about should a guy or should a guy not pay for the dinner. Like, should you be the guy? Should you like follow the old social contract and be the dude who pays for the restaurant, and or should you be the egalitarian, emancipated, liberated man where you go Dutch? This is a question that has been going on, by the way, I should say, since like the late 80s. This is not anything new. Let's see. What do you got going on here? Hello. I discovered the red pill about 2 months ago. I'm in a LTR right now. My girl has noticed. Okay, guys, I once again, Sam, log that for me, and we'll get, if you're on topic for today, I will give you priority. But you know what? Actually, I shouldn't do that. I actually have this that I should put on the bottom. There you go. See, there's your announcement. Okay, so today, and now that we're almost 15 minutes in, common shaming tactics that women use. Now, we have to sort of, before we get into shaming tactics, you have to understand sort of the mechanics of shame. Like, why does shame work? Does shame work? And the answer to that is yes. Shame does work. It has always worked. And the reason why we have even a question as to whether or not shame works or it doesn't work is because we live now in a gynocentric social order. So whenever we talk about things, when we talk about shaming language, or we talk about like a default to sort of shaming someone, the reason why this is even in our sort of popular consciousness right now is because way back in, I would say, like the late 70s in through the 80s and 90s and up to where we are right now, maybe up until 2010, we had this idea, I think, when we were trying to sort of emancipate women or liberate women or empower women, that they shouldn't be ashamed of themselves, or that they felt like the mythological patriarchy. God damn it. Hold on a second. There we go. I got to kill that out. The mythological patriarchy has used shaming language against women. It has made women ashamed to be like what they are. Or advertising was a patriarchal, I don't say plot, but a social construct that was intended to keep the woman down, to keep her subservient to the man, to disempower that woman. And one of the methods or the methodologies, I guess, is shaming that woman into thinking that she needs to fit a certain archetype, that she needs to be like the bikini model, or when we talk about when women talk about body shaming or fat shaming. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with the idea of fat shaming, or body positivity actually sprang up as an idea, I guess, to contradict or contradict. Is that, maybe that's a word? The idea that women should feel ashamed for being overweight, that shame doesn't work. And I've heard this like 100 different times from popular psychologists, popular psychology, Dr. Phil kind of, influences, I guess, that shame doesn't work. In fact, you'll hear you'll even read this on Twitter right now, where women will say that, they don't want to they don't want to dress a certain way. They don't want to keep their hair a certain way. They don't want to do certain things. They want to be independent of men. And as a technique, as a methodology, as a means to making themselves independent, they have to find a way to feel as, we talk about this culture of victimhood when it comes to women. Women, the joke, of course, right now on Twitter is that men are dying in much higher numbers of the virus than women are right now, but it's women who are most affected. It's that same thing with Hillary Clinton saying, the chief victims of war are women and children. Not the men actually dying in the war. It's actually the and of course, when I've talked about that particular quote, just to do a quick aside here, when I've talked about that quote, I think it's interesting because it illustrates so much about the female psyche. It illustrates a lot about women's innate sense of solipsism, which is something I really need to do a dedicated show about, I know. But it is this idea that no matter what happens, it is always harder on women. Men are disposable. That's really the basic essential message when you say, men dying in droves, women most affected. What that says is men are disposable. And if you've read the essay that I've written called The Disposables, then you'll get an idea what I mean. We've talked about this. I mean, this is all over the place with respect to evolutionary psychology. What is it? Sperm is cheap, eggs are expensive, and as a result, this is sort of like a species-wide part of our evolutionary mental firmware. Like we realize that men are supposed to sacrifice. Men have a burden of performance. We have to find some way to measure up. Now, I'm not saying just to women, but I mean just in performance in general. And as a result of that, it is men's sacrifice is something that is expected, and it's almost a uniquely male thing. I'm not saying that women don't sacrifice. Many do, okay, but I'm saying that as a gender expectation, as a conventional gender expectation, we expect men to put their lives on the line for women and for their children, right? To protect the kids, to take a bullet for your wife, take a bullet for your kids, that kind of stuff. So that's when I hear that, I hear disposability, right? Well, the thing about shame when it comes to reversing this is it's putting that onus of shame on the guy for not living up to that burden of performance. Like only a real man would do X, Y, and Z, or a real man would do whatever serves the female imperative, right? Whatever serves that woman's best interest. If you're a real man, if you're really living up to your duties, which of course is a sort of this innate idea that most men have, if you're really living up to your duties, if you're really being who you should be or who she thinks you should be, and as a member of a gynocentric social order, she represents the, you know, the correct way of thinking about this. If you're doing your job, if you're doing what a man should do, if you want the manhood badge on your lapel, then you'll do what she says. And if you're not, then you should be ashamed of yourself for shirking your duties. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. We're going to get to 4 different tactics, and I kind of distilled them down. I don't like to do lists because I think lists are very limiting. But in this particular instance, I've kind of distilled a lot of these tactics down to 4 really kind of common ways of thinking. Now, amongst each one of these 4 tactics, or these 4, I guess, I don't call them ideology, but they're the 4 ideas, the 4 basic ways, I guess, that women shame men. Amongst those, there's a lot of like kind of subcategories. And most of you guys, especially if you've been listening to this podcast or you've been reading my book or you're part of the Red Pill community, you probably know what I'm going to get into. But what you don't know is the underlying psychology underneath that. You don't know the mechanisms, and you don't know why these things like are supposed to work. Like right before we got into what I call the new order, when we get into the like say 2000 and beyond, when the internet age, where we have access to more data and we have a greater understanding of our environment, ourselves, our bodies, our society, like just whatever. Now that we are in an age of really kind of enlightened information, we can see why those old, attacks or insults. Sometimes they're insults, yes. Sometimes they are expectations. They might even be something. It doesn't even necessarily have to come. Like shaming tactics on men don't necessarily have to come from women that you're interested in, or just they could be just random women that you know, or it could be your family, it could be your mom, it could be your sister. They will use the same kinds of tactics because they have a base understanding of how gender should work. I think not that it is working, but how it should work. And then using that, this is how things should be, to turn it around on guys and to shame guys into doing certain things for them. Now, again, getting back to, Yolo has something here. This is good. Thank you for being on topic, Yolo. I appreciate that. Hi, Rollo. Want to know the survival evolutionary functions of shame. Well, Yolo, funny you should ask, because that's exactly what I'm about to get into right now. Okay, so here's the deal. When it comes to shame does work. All right, it works for children. We can see, if you know anything about child psychology, one of the things that's I think still in contention right now, although considering the state of the American Psychological Association, I'm not sure I want to buy into really anything they have to say right now. But when I was studying psychology and when I was doing my basic stuff for child psychology, there was a section in there based on shame. Like, why does shame work? Why do we default? Why does a father or a mother, particularly mother, why do they default to shame? Why do we use shame as some sort of means to modify behavior? And the reason for that is because on some level of consciousness, we want to believe, at least, that a person, a normal, healthy human being, has at least some sense of shame, or has some sense of guilt, or some sense of, some kind of insight about themselves, that they question why they did certain things. Like, was that appropriate? I have guys all the time. Guys will hit me up, like even after I was I did the show on Sunday with John from Modern Life Dating. We did the body language stuff and the photos. I had guys hitting me up in my emails and my DMs, showing me pictures, saying, "Was this right? Was I okay with that?" And on a baseline, it's almost as if they were ashamed to be positioned in a particular like couples photo or something like that. And they want to say, "Was this beta? Does she think I'm beta?" And maybe that's not shame, but it's an insight. It's like questioning yourself or questioning why you did certain things. And so shame has an evolutionary element, but it also has a social element to it as well. So when we start to talk about shame, the first place that human beings, little baby human beings, learn shame is when they're kids. because it is something that is effective in modifying behavior of children. So you say, what did you do that for? You should be ashamed of yourself for doing that. Right? Well, most kids, particularly young boys, don't know what they should be ashamed of and what they should be ashamed of themselves. Now, I'm going to relate this mostly to boys at this point, because we're going to talk about how women shame men, but that's not to disqualify, little girls. Little girls can be ashamed as well. They can be shamed. Now, it's one thing to have a healthy sense of shame. It's another thing to let that become sort of like this complex for you, or to have it become something that is internalized for you, so that when you get to be, say, a teenager, or you could be a young adult, or maybe even into your older years, that shame is not something that is dominating your life. Like, you need to, at some point, you're going to, like, early in your life, you're going to have some sort of insight, maybe a sense of guilt, maybe a sense of questioning why you do certain things, or what was appropriate and what was not. And then later on, that moves to, should I even care what this person thinks? So, and both of those considerations are derived from insight about oneself, about understanding, like, should I have done this? Should I not have done this? And why do I think that I shouldn't have? Well, was it because I had an overbearing mother, overbearing father, those kinds of things? Why do I feel shame in the first place? Shame, as I said before, shame works. That's why we keep using it. So when women say, well, shame is ineffective, no, it's quite effective. And women know that, but they don't want to be shamed for certain things. They do. One of the things that I think men and women approach and consider shame in different ways. And this is very similar to, like, what I say about how men and women have different concepts of love. They have different concepts of respect. They have different concepts of honor and duty and that kind of stuff. I think there's for men, I think there's almost a more innate sense of what makes for duty, responsibility, than it does for women. Because women, when it comes to respectability, do not have the same burden of performance that men do, because men base their dominance hierarchies on their competence and their dominance, of course, but that comes from an understanding of a burden of performance. So if Joe is better at his burden of performance than Jim over here, then we sort of have this, and we do this like innately. It's not like something we go, we're considering them. I mean, maybe we do, but like, our brains don't have to sit there and consider that. We know, we can sort of, if we know the social context, we can sort of establish status pretty easily. So when we talk about shame is also one of those topics where a guy approaches the idea of shame differently than a woman. So one of the things that's really happened, I think, since the late 90s and into where we are right now, because we have this globalized, interconnected society, global society, or globalizing society. Maybe we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there pretty quick. And I think we're going sort of through the birth pangs of pangs, whatever, of that globalization right now. But as a result of that, women and what I call the fempowerment narrative consider shame something that they shouldn't have to deal with, that it's some sort of oppressive thing that the patriarchy has applied to them. And therefore, like I said, you get the idea of body shaming or fat shaming should be illegal, or fat shaming is in some way misogynist. Back in, I want to say it was 2015, maybe 2016, there was a ad campaign by Protein World. Thank you, Protein World, for introducing me to the beautiful model that is known as Renee Sommerfeld. She is absolutely stunningly gorgeous. If people want to know what, on the Tomassi scale, what a 9.5 would look like, go look up Renee Sommerfeld. She was the one who was the model on these I thought they were pretty simplistic protein supplement advertisements that were on mostly on what subway trains, or I guess you guys call them trains in the UK. And there was a huge outcry because the campaign was, "Are you beach body ready?" And this was back in 2015. I'm sure I've written actually a couple of articles about this as well. Now, naturally, there was also a male version of this as well, but the female version was pretty much Renee Sommerfeld's body from the breasts down to about, mid thigh, and selling a protein. Okay. Same thing. There's also a guy who had, pretty cut chest and 6-pack abs. Same message, exact same message, but women lost their minds because they felt like that was shaming. That was body shaming. That was every woman is beautiful at every size, right? That's the idea. It's a pushback against the idea of shame, that women ought to be ashamed for not being in the same condition as, say, a beautiful, Fitness America pageant winner. Okay. And that really works on, remember, when it comes to female agency, women's base agency with men is always their sexuality. And that is, of course, by order of degree. So when a woman who is a 9.5, like Renee Sommerfeld, versus a woman who is a 3 or a 4 who's overweight and kind of pudgy, well, yeah, that's going to probably make women feel a little bit insecure for that, and they're going to lash out. They're not going to lash out at the actual reason why they feel shame. They're going to lash out at the source of what they are feeling shame from. Women know what shame is. They feel it. They do it amongst themselves. It is a common text. Shame, I should say, like, guys are going to say this all the time. Then I agree that women use shame as a tactic. And that's what we're getting into today. But I want you guys to understand the mechanics of this first. So it comes naturally for women to shame other women. So I mentioned this in the body language show on Sunday, that when you're in a group, a mixed group of people, and you're at a social event, maybe you're at a club, maybe you're at a party, where you're at a bar and grill, whatever, and you're in a group of like women, and you're maybe like the 1 or 2 guys that are in this group. If another woman walks into the club or into the bar or wherever you guys are at, and she's dressed and she looks good, like she is in her ovulatory phase, and she is dressed with the hoop earrings and in red short skirt or something like that, and it's pretty much advertising kind of thing. What's the first thing out of those women's mouths? Like, oh, I can't believe she wears something. Only a slut will wear something. Or it's like, this murmuring kind of thing. And that's the first thing that comes out of a group of women, because for women, the social peer, the peer clutch is what it's called. The peer clutch of those women is where they get, well, that's where the dominance hierarchy amongst women comes from. That's why it's more like really collectivist. But from within that clutch, there are a lot of sort of psychological dynamics that go on in that peer clutch. And one of those is, of course, judging the looks for sure, but judging the quality, I guess, of women who are outside of that peer clutch amongst themselves. And the first place they start is shame. She should be ashamed for that. Only a slut wears that. Only this. And when we talk about shaming, especially when we talk about body shaming or slut shaming, that is almost a uniquely female thing. You will not hear, particularly these days, because most men are walking on eggshells these days with respect to like slut shaming. And so you'll literally get marches where women are going out on the street topless, and they've got, they on Sharpie on their chest saying, slut, or not asking for it, or it's like the slut march, like they're proud to be sluts. And why do they do that? Well, because ostensibly, it is a push against the idea that they should feel shame for what they are, for how they are, for the way they believe, those kinds of things. So women understand shame, I think, almost to a better degree than men do, simply because men have to be experimental. We have to try things to see if we're good at things. So even if you belly flop trying to do a certain thing and people laugh at you, you have, it's trial and error. It's something that you have to go through to figure out if you're good at something, you're not good at something. But it's putting yourself out there and trying to at least figure out what you're good at and what you're not. Guys might feel a little bit of shame for doing certain things. But remember, for most guys, that shame really comes from a social side of things rather than an internal side of things. One of the points that I really need to make here too is that when we're talking about raising boys in this, sort of demasculinized, emasculated, gynocentric society, is that we have to, or a female-centric social order has to find a way to make girls and women that little boys' mental point of origin. It's almost as if that's the basic starting point for most of this sort of feminization, or this feminine correct society that wants boys to defer to the authority of women. Well, how do you do that? Well, you've got to take that kid, that boy, And first of all, like I said before, we raise our boys like they're defective girls, but in that raising, we have to take away that sense of adventurousness, or have to take away that sort of boyish alphaness that I always say that most boys are born with. We have to crush that out of them. Well, how do we do that? And how do we replace women with what would naturally be his own mental point of origin? Well, we use shame. We teach boys that if you were a better boy, if you were a better human, and we literally call them good humans instead of boys will be boys. I've written about this as well. It's actually going to be in the book 4. I've got an essay that came out right after, I think it was like not this last Women's March, but the one before. And their feminists were dressing up their little boys, single mommy feminists dressing up their little boys as if they are like little miniature male feminists. And the slogan was, boys will be boys, and they would cross out the boys and they would say good humans, thus saying that boy was born a bad human. If you are a boy, you are a bad human. If you're a boy being a boy, you're a bad human. And we need to find some way to crush out that boyishness, that innate masculinity that comes from a little boy who goes through being, into a teenager and being a young man. Crush that out of them. How do we do that? We shame them for acting like a boy. We shame them for not learning like a girl. We shame them for, go sit in the corner, Johnny, until you learn how to behave. Here, take your Adderall, Johnny, or take your Ritalin, Johnny, and when you can come back and learn with the rest of the class like girls, then you can stop feeling shame. Now that's the basis. That's the beginning of shame when it comes from women to men. I had to get into the mechanics here a little bit because you have to understand where most of these tactics are coming from. So I'm going to get to the first one here in just a second after I answer Vinny. He says, do you think shaming works in men only because it represents a loss in sexual opportunity? Not only, partially it does. I think that a lot of guys, for instance, Vinny, let's just give you a hypothetical here. Most guys, when they become more red pill, they become red pill aware, and they unplug, and they start using game, or maybe they got into like PUA, and they say, you know what I've been doing hasn't been working. Find something else. They go and they learn a little bit of game. Maybe they do some pickup, just like basic stuff. I'm not saying you got to go out there and put, freaking black nail polish on or anything. You're just learning some basics and stuff. One thing that happens as a result is guys will get into it and they'll start acting and behaving in a certain way with women, just experimenting, because they got nothing to lose at that point, right? And the first thing out of most women that know them, first thing out of their mouth is, you're a jerk. You're acting like a jerk. This isn't who you are. You're trying to be somebody that you're not. And it doesn't necessarily have to come from women as well. It can come from your feminized male friends as well. But when somebody says you're trying to do something, you're trying to be somebody that you're not. This is why I always, really quickly here, this is why I always tell guys, when you make a change in yourself, it has to be gradual, and expect resistance from your friends, from your family, from people that know you, because they'll say the same thing. Human beings need predictability. They need to know that this is part of our need as human beings to be secure in our very chaotic world. And now I think people are realizing this. We have a very chaotic world. What is the first thing that human beings are looking for? They're looking for security. They want to, well, we're all going to be okay, or we're all in this together. And, I'm seeing the commercials right now and all that, but human beings look for security. And in that security, they need some kind of predictability. So they know that if the world all goes to hell, that you're going to be the same person you are right now when you are, out of a crisis situation and in a crisis situation. So I'm trying to make things a little bit relevant here. But the thing is that human beings want you to be predictable, because that's how human beings control you. It's a means of control for sure. That's why shaming is such a thing. It's like what shaming does, and this is another baseline thing, is what shaming does is it questions your authenticity about who you are, why you did something, or what you believe about yourself. Like, for instance, I've had, and this gets to your question here as well, Vinny. I've had several, like back in the day when I first started writing and I first started bringing these things up, people would say, you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking those things, for thinking like that. for believing that all women are like that. No, that's not it. It's not the actual belief itself. It's the challenge to that other person's authority. It's a challenge to her or his control over the way that you are actually thinking. So if I start talking about women's nature, if I even just question women's nature, if I say, hey, have you ever noticed that women are like this, and it's unflattering, it implies sort of an unflattering nature to women, just my asking that is something that women will say, you should be ashamed of yourself for even thinking that, or for even asking that. Your actual what they're saying, of course, is your actual thought process is something you ought to be ashamed of. That's a mind job right there. You should be ashamed of yourself for thinking that, for believing that. You should be ashamed of yourself for being who you are. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. So that's part of it. I also understand what you're saying here, Vinny, with respect to the loss of sexual opportunity, because what happens is when guys start to change and women say, you're acting like a jerk, that triggers something in the back of the guy's head that says, I don't want to be a jerk because jerks don't get laid. Or maybe they believing that jerks could get laid, or that chicks dig jerks, right? Believing that is definitely counterintuitive to a guy who's been brought up with female shame, with a blue pill mindset. So I think instinctively or instinctually, like we've been conditioned by the blue pill to think that if a woman is trying to shame us, or if a woman is in some way trying to delegitimize even just the questions or what we think of as our authority, that in some way that represents a loss in sexual opportunity. And so that's why most guys, particularly most really sort of lifelong dyed-in-the-wool blue pill beta guys, will never experiment. They'll never step out, because first of all, they're in a scarcity mentality, a scarcity mindset, so that they don't want to step outside of the rules. They don't want to step outside of what they think or what they believe, they've been conditioned to believe, should work for them all the time. And usually they're experimenting, they're experimenting as a result of the fact that what they've been doing for a long time isn't actually working, and they've got to try something else. You will understand this. I'll leave it at this. Understand this, that if you make a change in yourself, if you become red pill aware, if you decide to do game, if you decide to interact with women with a new attitude, with a new outlook, with a red pill lens, if you do that, you can expect that women will say, you should be ashamed of yourself. You're a jerk. If a woman says you're a jerk, you're doing it right. That's where you ought to be, because what that's telling you is that now you're making yourself your own mental point of origin, and you really honestly don't care. You don't care what that woman thinks, and you're going to do what you're going to do anyways. And I think getting to that point where guys can be independent in their own thinking and make themselves their own mental point of origin it's one of the hardest parts of really unplugging, because you're going to run into that kind of resistance. So just know that that's going to be coming at you. Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Here we go. Knowledge Seeker says, hey, Rollo, as a Muslim, I've noticed that many of our women in the West actually shame their husbands, fathers, and brothers whenever we say we want more wives. How are we supposed to spin plates? Well, first of all, I'm not a Muslim, so I don't think Muslims are actually allowed to spin plates. I think you're allowed to marry plates. That kind of comes down to like the difference between, like, say, polygamy. Yeah, I got that right this time. Comes down to polygamy and really what is a more monogamous form of polygamy. Like you're allowed 4 wives, right? Great. Well, you're going to run into that shame because those women are not going to want you. They're going to want if you bring on another wife, let's just say, and I have written about this in book 4, just so, because I know that's going to be a question. If you bring in another wife as a Muslim or as a Mormon or as whatever, if that's part of your culture and your religion, what that represents to that woman is a threat to your resources. So it's not so much an emotional investment as it is a resource investment. I'm not saying that emotional isn't a problem. It probably very well could be, but from a pragmatic evolutionary respect, women who are going to like shame you for wanting to have another wife or whatever, remember where that's coming from. the impetus. I always ask yourself this really about anything that I talk about, but where is like, what's underneath the hood? Women are shaming me. Okay. That's why I'm explaining to you right now how shame works before we can get into the means and how they do that. I can give you red meat all day and say, well, women tell men to man up, or women say that men are egotists or have fragile egos, and you go, yeah, that's great. But that doesn't feed you. That doesn't do anything for you. I want to give you guys like the actual underlying reasons why these things exist in the first place. So you can sit there, and I'm not saying you did this, knowledge seeker, but I'm just saying a lot of guys will see something like, oh, Rollo's talking about shaming tactics. All right, let's go talk. And I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts here. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. Let's see. Anybody else got a non-topic here before I continue? Mosi, thanks for that $5. Says my mom's trying to indirectly shame me, saying your cousin is married with 2 kids and he is younger and you are still single. Yep, you're gonna get that one too. That's of course that sort of keys into women's life strategies right there. Your mom, that's another. I've got it right here on the list. So we'll catch up to that one here in just a second, Mosi. You'll understand what I'm talking about here. Travis, thank you for that $2, brother. And last but not least, Travis again says, what about the reverse scenario? We're not going to talk about reverse scenario right now. Okay. I'll tell you why. Because when I'm talking about one sex, I'm talking about one sex. Problem with, again, this is a topic like blank slate equalism is something that I could talk about for a very long time. So yes, men shame women. Yes, men shame other men. Okay. Right now, we're going to talk about how women shame men. We'll get to that later on towards the end of this thing here too. Is there a good reason for men to shame women for bad behavior? What are the possible outcomes? Yes, yes, there is. There are definitely good reasons for men to shame women. They are entirely ineffective in a gynocentric social order right now. It's the only kind of shame that most women feel today is from other women. And even then they'll question that woman and say, well, she's part of the patriarchy, or she's part of, she's not one of my girls. Right now, how does that work with the sisterhood or pluralis? Well, we'll get to that here in a little bit, but women will generally, they'll be prompted to more insight, I guess. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say, from other women. They don't want to hear they don't want to be told shit. Right. That's one of my quotes in one of my essays. Women don't want to be told shit, particularly not from guys. If a guy says something, even as measured as a guy can possibly be about it, even if a guy says, hey, you know what? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about these things? Do you have any insight? Do you have any shame? Do you have any, why are you doing what you're doing? You're never going to be able to, go and look at, what is it, the Only Friends thing right now? Or look how popular Chatterbait has become right now. Look how popular cam girling has become in the apocalypse here, right? Look how popular all that's become right now. And then ask yourself, as a guy, do you think that woman is going to feel shame for me doing that? Of course not. She's getting all kinds of positive reinforcement from other people that aren't me. And so, in fact, me shaming her actually reinforces her sense of self, her hubris, her dedication. I was solipsism, of course, but like her dedication to herself, because every time a guy says, hey, you should be ashamed of yourself, or I get guys this all the time, particularly the guys who are like the patriarch kind of guys, right? Well, if men didn't do these things, then women would be better women. No, they're still going to do those things because there will always be a demand for those things. But even and I never hear any of the patriarchs say this, but even if they did, if they say we're trying to shame women for being, cam models or showing their ass off or whatever it is, or being like very narcissistic, let's just say. First of all, it wouldn't cross most guys' minds to do that these days, because that would make them a jerk, right? If you try to shame a woman for anything, really, if you try to shame her for body fat or for fat, you try to shame her for being a cam model, you try to shame her for these things, that almost works against you now, because it says that you're so insecure that you would actually want to try to change another person's behavior. We always say this, right? Like, well, the only person's behavior you can change is yourself, right? Well, then why are you trying to shame somebody for that? Well, we'll get to that a little bit here. Now, I want to start with a couple here. This is the most common tactic, and I'm sure you guys have heard this. And also, this is a tactic that's not just unique to women; it's also unique to men as well, depending on like how moralistic they tend to be. But it's usually the men need to man up and step up. Men need to accept responsibility. And like I was saying just a minute ago, a lot of moralists, a lot of traditional conservative guys, the patriarch movement, whatever the hell, the Puritans right now, the neo-masculine Puritans right now, whether it's a Karen, right? Whether it's the red pill women, or whether it's the guy who is, the pinnacle of men or the apex of men, or, just find some virtuous adverb and then put man after it. And whatever that account is, this is we get the man up. We get man up as men constantly from all different angles. You'll get it from your family, just like the guy who was just asking me a question about how his mom was saying, you need to, your brother or your cousin, whoever is younger than you, he's got a baby and a kid, he's married, blah blah blah. He's further along the path than you are. You should be ashamed of yourself. What that is, that's not you should be ashamed of yourself. That's you should be ashamed of yourself for not living up to this ideal. This ideal is right. This ideal is the way you should be. This is how you should live. And I know a lot of MGTOWs will get this too, because a lot of guys will say, well, you shouldn't, if you're a MGTOW, then you should be ashamed of yourself because you're not out there. You're not hustling. You're not doing your thing, whatever. And MGTOWs, of course, hate that because it seems like it's coming from another guy. It's a man using shame to shame another guy. And you'll get that, like I said, from other men. You'll get that from women as well, but it's usually the man up, step up. You're not living up to a particular standard. Now, when somebody throws that at you, whether it's a man or a woman, it presumes that they presume by initiating that, they presume that they are the authority. They are speaking for the common good, the standard. They're speaking for the standard, the social standard at that point. So if I'm a guy or if I'm a girl, and I say, or I'm your mom or your dad or whatever, says you're not living up to these expectations, to these standards, what if you want a counter to that, you need to sort of consider the source, right? Do I consider this source? Do I want, like Rich will say this, Rich Cooper will say this all the time. Is this somebody whose opinion you respect? I think a better, or is it somebody like, has a life that you'd want to live? I think a better question is this, do you believe in that person speaking for the overall standard of what you think ought to be? Like I get this a lot from, or I read this a lot from guys, particularly the guys who are sort of the Christian moralists, or they don't have to be Christian. They could be Muslim. They could be Jewish as well. It doesn't matter. But the guys who maybe they're at that point in their lives where they've followed this script, and now suddenly they want to be. It's all about virtue, and it's all about living this sort of virtuous moral life. And that if you're not living like that, then there's something wrong with you, and you should be ashamed of yourself for not living according to their ideals. And again, you need to ask yourself, is this something that I need to really concern myself with? Because eventually what's going to happen is you're going to come down to the question of responsibility versus authority. Now, you get this all the time, particularly from women who are in sort of like Brian and I kind of jokingly call these the sun hat brigade, right? The sun hat women who are suddenly want to have this virtuous red pill guy who says what he means and means what he says. And if you are in any way like a player, or if you're anyway a one of these caricatures of a pickup artist, then there's something wrong with you, and you should be ashamed of yourself for doing those things. And maybe you get to a point where you are ashamed of those things. But the point I'm making here is that at some point you have to ask yourself, is this person an authority? Is this somebody who is actually speaking for in some sense of legitimacy or validity that I should care about? That I don't care about honestly, I don't care what certain people say about Rollo Tomassi. I don't really give a flying F, but I'm gonna go and keep doing what I've been doing for a long time. I am not above shame. Everybody will throw shame at me for like suggesting things or asking questions in my books, and they'll think that there's something wrong with me. In fact, that's one of the first things that I get when I do a new interview, like from guys who are sort of uninitiated or on the outside of the red pill. They'll say, "Who hurt you? How did you get?" And that's of course one of my next ones here, which is shame about like being the way you are because you were burned or you're bitter or there was some event. And that's the first place everybody goes, well, who hurt you? How did that happen? Like, why are you the way you are? Because you should be ashamed for who you are, but we want to get to the bottom of it, because there's always this presumption that if somebody doesn't think in the same way, within the same idealistic box as someone else, that there has to be something wrong with them, because that presumption there is a reinforcement of that ideological box that that person is in. So everybody believes the way I do and you don't, so you're outside that box. How did that happen? We were inquiring minds want to know. No, you don't. What you're looking for is you're looking for affirmation of the ideological box in which you are sitting right now. Because if I have something or I say something, if I ask the wrong questions that challenges that ideological box, then you need reinforcement. You need to find a way to build the walls of that box up again. And the first place you go is either shame or questioning, like, or presuming that there is actually something wrong with that person because you don't believe in what that guy believes or that woman believes as the mainstream idea. Everybody believes, like, one thing is funny is like when you go on Twitter, you will see this happen all the time is we factionalize ourselves. And that's one of the things that the online communities right now, I think it was Tim Pool who was saying something to the effect that we have never been more divided and polarized politically. And he had, I wish I knew where the data set came from, but he had this graph of how like liberals and conservatives or Democrats and Republicans or, Christians and atheists, and how we used to have like sort of a crossover. There was this, I think a bell curve was a crossover kind of thing. And it showed from like, say the early 90s into like where we're at right now, like 2018 or 2019. And gradually, and I was just going to say gradually, dramatically at right around 2009, 2010, you see this divide that comes up, and it's like everyone's on either end of the polarized spectrum of what it is they believe. And within those particular factions, there's factions within those factions as well that are also isolated, because it's never been easier to hear what we want to hear these days. It's never been easier to say, you know what, I don't want to hear whatever this person has to say, or I think that person's crazy, and so what you do is you sort of, and we get into these echo chambers. We get into, and people accuse me of this all the time. I realize that, but we get into these for all of our communication and our connectivity today. We get into this factionalization of listening to who we think is right. Like this, I want to say that I try to stay as objective as I possibly can. I subscribe to accounts that are completely ideologically opposed to anything that I might say, because I want to know what they're talking about. I want to know like how they come to the conclusions that they do. And that's why I've always said, like, even if you're talking to somebody who is like, who you think is just like ideologically evil, you still need to listen to what they're saying and see how they came to that particular idea. But we don't do that these days. And, we sort of stay in our ideological box or our ideological echo chamber. So for those guys, for the people who are in that, say, that box, they think that everybody that's in that box with them is society, is normal. And anything outside that ideological box is something that is a person who is either insane or is against them. Like human beings are very tribal. So we always look for the other. We always look for somebody who's outside. And we have to explain to ourselves and explain to our psyches, I guess, why that person thinks the way they do. Well, the easiest way to do that is say that person had some event, something that really damaged that person. And when I talk about hybristophilia in women, it's unique to women. I mean, virtually unique to women. But we don't talk about that. We would rather focus on, well, there's something wrong with her. She's damaged goods. I've written several essays about how the idea of women being damaged is actually a tactic that women will use. I'm damaged. I had a bad father. That's a real common one, right? Well, okay. Well, at what point do you take responsibility for yourself? At what point do you own, who you are and change the way you are, change your life for that? Yeah. So anyway, I'm getting a little off topic here, but the idea for shaming tactic number one is you need to man up. You need to be who I say you are, whether that's family, whether that's a woman, whether that's another guy. It presumes authority in that person. Okay. Now, the other part, and this is particular to women, is that in the last, really the last, I would say since the sexual evolution, but let's just say the last 40, 45 years. Bulletproof coffee, you need it. In the last 45 years, except for the damn butter in it, in the last 45 years, we have, I don't think it's any secret, particularly to my listenership and my readership here, is that we live in a time where we have, like I said, raise boys as if they're defective girls. Well, part of that acculturation and that social engineering project over the course of like 4 generations of boys and men right now is that we teach them to question masculinity. We teach them that masculinity is illegitimate. It's a mask. It's an act. And if they were really who they were, if they could really be who they want to be naturally, if they could really get to the authentic side of themselves, they would look more like girls. They would behave more like girls. They would emote like girls. They would be vulnerable like little girls. That's who they would really be. But because they're boys and because of this social construction ideal of masculinity, that they can't be who they really want to be. And so we get like documentaries like The Masks Men Wear, or The Masks Boys Wear. So masculinity becomes a mask. It becomes an act. It becomes a put on, and guys believe in that. That's one of the first things that guys will say when they become red pill aware. Or they start using game. They go, "Rollo, I can't keep up the act. Who can possibly have 4 girls a plate spinning? I can't do that. I can't keep up. I can't, because it's an act. I can't play the role all the time. I need to let my hair down and be me." Right? Well, that's because you don't believe it. That's because it's not something that is internally that you believe that masculinity and game is an act for you, as opposed to how you really are and what you're really about, what your personality is. You design your own personality. You get to decide who you want to be, whether you believe that or not. You have the control. You want to raise a flag of, freedom of choice. Well, along with that comes the idea that you can at least in some way modify your own personality and do whatever the hell that you want to do. Well, what happens is, because masculinity is an act, because masculinity is particularly amongst blue pill guys, they see it, and women of course reinforce this. They say, "Oh, that's just you being macho." I'm sure you've heard that, like back in the 70s. I was, we don't want any macho guys. We want real guys. We want guys who tell us how they feel and are in touch with their feminine side. And where did that come from? So if you don't do that, if you believe in your own masculinity, well, you're an arrogant prick or you're a jerk, and you don't want to be a jerk. You want to be more like women. You want to be more vulnerable. You want to identify with the feminine, and that ends up becoming authentic. But in the meantime, what happens is manhood and masculinity becomes something that guys can't figure out. They don't know, because first of all, they don't have a father, or they don't have a social structure that teaches them authentic, genuine masculinity. They think that masculinity is an act. Well, when you ask these guys, what does masculinity mean to you? They don't know. I don't know. It's whatever I say it is. It's like, I'm a man, and I don't go and eat hamburgers and steaks and potatoes, and it's like all this schmaltzy, cliched idea of what a guy ought to like. I'm Marlboro, man. I don't smoke cigars and ride horses. I like to go and I'm a florist. That kind of stuff. They don't know what a man ought to be. They're unfamiliar with conventional masculinity because they've never had it modeled for themselves. And then second of all, they've always had it de-emphasized, or anything that would make them more conventionally masculine is not rewarded, whereas anything that would make them more conventionally feminine is rewarded. So as a result, we base our sense of who's authentic and who, like, what we should feel shame for based on what we've been conditioned to believe is authentic. So if I think that the ideal that I ought to strive for, my burden of performance, should be making myself identified as much as possible as being a girl, and maybe in some cases amongst transgender to actually become a girl, if I think that that's the ideal and I'm not living up to that ideal, then I'm going to feel shame if I act like a man, if I act like a conventionally masculine guy. And so what happens is then women pick up on this. And I'm not saying that this is some, like, pre-designed sinister plot. I'm just saying that women innately pick up on this, and they say, if you don't do what I tell you to do, if you don't man up, if you don't live up to your burden of performance, and whatever that is, in this case, it's being more feminine. If you don't do what a woman does, then you should feel shame. Manning up is acting like a woman to them. You need to be more interested in women's imperatives. And what women, of course, do then is they take that shaming tactic and they use that to their own strategic benefits. That's how you get women who are into open hypergamy. They will go and they'll be with the hot guy that they want to have sex with, breed with that guy. And then shame is not for that guy. Rules are not for that guy. Shame and rules are for the beta guy that she needs to keep in line to make sure that she has security, she has provisioning, she has, the lights come on and the food's on the table from that guy. How does she keep that dude in line? Well, she doesn't really want to have sex with him. So what does she use to keep him on the plantation? She uses shame. They also use the idea that women hold the manhood card. And I said that at the beginning of this show, is that manhood becomes something that is like a merit badge. Right? It's like, if you don't do these things, if you don't marry a single mother, then you aren't a man. You're not a real men. Marry single mothers. Real men do what women tell them. Real men don't care if they're, and I've seen these tweets. Real men don't care if their wives are secure enough in their masculinity. That's another shaming tactic we'll talk about here in a second. Are secure enough in their masculinity that if a woman cheats on him and she has a baby, that's not his, that he'll father the baby. That is some real mind fucking shame right there. Because if you don't, then suddenly there's this whole online world that's going to shame you for not helping that girl out, because now, well, she made a mistake. It's an indiscretion, and you're not man enough, and you're not secure enough in your masculinity to forgive her. Well, at the end of the day, she's just facilitated her mating strategy. And we call these guys cucks, right? We call them cuckolds. There's a reason for that, is because they are parentally investing in children that are not their own. But the shame comes from not being a real man. From guys agonize over this. They'll throw this out on on Reddit threads and say, am I the asshole, right? Am I the asshole for leaving her because she actually got knocked up from this guy and expects me to, and has openly said, I expect you to help me with this kid. Forgive me for what I've done. I really love you, but now I'm pregnant and I don't believe in an abortion. Wow. What that is that's an evolutionary jackpot for that girl, but you're going to feel shame for that if you abandon her. And now all kinds of other, feelings and emotions and a lot of shit just kind of comes up as a result of that. But again, it's women holding the manhood card. I'm using that as sort of an extreme example. There's other examples as well. Like real men do X. Whenever you hear that, that's a shaming tactic that's used, and it starts from the principle or the idea that woman or whoever is saying this, it could be a man as well. Real men do this, right? Whoever is saying that is using that as a shaming tactic. And what they're saying is, I have the manhood card. I have the definition to real masculinity right here that you've been looking for, you've been confused about for your entire life, because you've been conditioned since the time you were a little kid to be confused or to loathe your own gender. And guess what? I have authentic masculinity. It's right here in my hand. And all you have to do is do what I tell you to do. And then you'll be living up to your burden of performance. And then I'll give you the masculinity or the manhood merit badge. But that, whatever that is usually not in your best interest. But the reason you feel shame is because you aren't living up to what you think will get you that manhood card, that will get you that merit badge. So that's where the basis of the man up tactic of shame really comes from. So remember this when you see those things like men need to do X or real men do this. Always question the source. Always realize, is this person somebody that's speaking from a position of authority, and do I align with what they're saying? Because I'm not saying that like sometimes that like guys are not going to be looking out for guys' best interests. They might, but you need to ask that question. That is a very common tactic amongst women. You're not a man unless you do these things. So that's one. Number two is this: a woman's end count or notch count is irrelevant. That women will love to throw that one out there because, again, that if you as a guy have a problem with a woman's sexual past, that is something that they think that you as a man, you should feel shame for because you're insecure in your masculinity. In fact, pretty much every one of these shaming tactics will rely on one thing, is that you should feel insecure in your masculinity if you don't accept this shame, if you don't accept this as being, the normalcy. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was, and I got into a Twitter debate, I guess, about this, and I said, you know what, if like women, particularly women in this era, who have higher notch counts than any previous era, and I can show you the stats and I can show you the graphs for this. Like a lot of guys will say, well, you're not the one to put the flag on the moon, right? You're the first one there. And they wonder why it is that guys feel like they need to know, or why they feel insecure if they don't know how many partners that person has had. Well, there's a very good reason for that. It's because women with higher notch counts have a much more difficult time pair bonding in marriage after that. And there's other things that go along with that as well. But the primary reason that men are concerned with those things is because they are looking innately, evolutionarily speaking, men are looking for a woman who is a good prospect for continuing his genetic line, for a woman who's going to be loyal to him, and a woman who is not going to cuckold him. Because remember, for men, that exchange, there's a lot of risk that goes on for a man who has options, presuming the man has options, but there's a lot of risk that goes on for a man with respect to his own paternity. And this is an evolved dynamic in men. That's why we get jealous. That's why we feel like we're suspicious too. And that's one of the problems I have with the quote unquote poly lifestyle right now. Is the solution to being polyamorous is for men to eroticize that paternity, to being cuckolded, right? That paternity jealousy. And the reason that jealousy exists, the reason why men, and women too, but mostly men innately are jealous, is because the jealous guys who protected their women and the jealous guys who were suspicious, those guys tended to be the dudes that sent their genes on into the next generation. Because they were looking out, on some level of consciousness, realized that they had to be concerned with their own paternity. Well, enter 2020. Actually, I shouldn't say 2020, more like 2010, right? Now the social order is, well, men shouldn't care about who the father is. Real men will be stepdads. They're not the dad. They're not the stepdad. They're the dad who stepped up. And I've talked about this a lot on lots of other podcasts as well. So I'm not gonna beat a dead horse here. But when women say that their notch count shouldn't matter, or they rely on on the idea that a man is insecure in his masculinity if he doesn't do these things, again, that's shame. But understand where the shame is coming from. The shame is coming from a woman who wants to, in some way, enable and optimize her own mating strategy. And so if a guy has a problem with a woman who has a sexual past, well, he should be ashamed for that. He should even be ashamed for asking the woman. And again, that's a social shaming, but it has a latent purpose. And the purpose is the latent message, I should say, is that paternity shouldn't matter to you. A woman who the idea that a woman can have sex with like 10 or 12 guys or 20 guys or maybe even to triple digits or whatever shouldn't make any difference. It's the same thing with like slut shaming. It's the same thing with it's like sex workers. Like sex workers unite, right? We're proud. It's okay. We can have sex. It's just an act, right? It's just something we can do. I'm not trying to be moralistic here. I'm just saying that there's a psychological thing that goes on with women. Now, here's the next thing, and I've already got this, and I'm coming back to that one question I got. Well, what about men do it too? Men shame too, and women shame men, and men shame women, and that's sort of tit for tat, right? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. No. Here's the thing: is for men, sex is something that men can dissociate from the emotional side of things. That's why pornography is so popular amongst men. It's not like, men are probably going to feel a sense of shame if they're taught to feel a sense of shame about jerking off to pornography, but it doesn't stop them from doing it. It's still, that's funny thing is, and here's something to sort of put under your hat here is, shame is subordinate to the physical process, to physicality. Like, God damn it. I'm going to tell you guys a story here. Like everybody, like every guy that I've known has had sex with one chick that he had some sort of regret. Like she was a fat chick, or she wasn't the chick that you probably should have banged, but it was after 2 a.m. She was hot and ready to go, and you were horny and you were half drunk and you got with that girl, right? You probably felt a sense of shame maybe after, but during, you were like all into it because you were getting what you wanted to get. So shame as a social thing, but also as a personal thing, is something that is subordinate to the physical process. So yeah, there's things you should be ashamed to do, but you still want to do them. It's like a guy. It's like the MGTOWs. As MGTOWs say, "Oh, the juice isn't worth the squeeze." Yeah, but you still want the juice. You might not do the squeeze, and you might say swear off of the juice, but you still want the juice. You still jerk off the porn. You still want to get with a chick. You still want that release. So your convictions and everything else is subordinate to what you need as a human being. I'm not saying you can't control it. You can, but the fact is the operative state of you on planet Earth is that you need to get what you need to get. Right? You need to get laid. You need to eat. You need to breathe. You need to take a dump. Whatever. You need to do what you need to do as a human being. So you can feel guilt. I feel guilty about eating this. Yeah, until you eat it and you go, okay, I ate it. And then you might feel bad after you ate junk food. Like maybe you have a dedication, a conviction that you should work out all the time. I want to get 6-pack abs, and then suddenly you go and eat a Big Mac or something right there. And when you're eating it, it feels good. You're like, oh, yeah, I deserve this. I deserve this. I'm good, right? And then afterwards, you feel shame or you feel guilt for that. So again, shame is always subordinate to what it is you want as physicality. What we want viscerally is subordinate. I'm not saying that you can't control that. You can, but in the grand scheme of things, that's how it works. Oh, let's see. You blinked. Thanks, you blinked. What did you have here? He says, the greatest triumph for a cheating wife in 2020 is to catch the China virus while her husband practices social distance. Well, thank you. There's your 50 Norwegian kookaberries. Graham Miller, what did you say? U.S. women love to shame American guys who travel abroad to date women. Even a lot of fellow American guys will pile on in the shaming. Of course they will. We'll talk about why guys shame other guys. There's let's just talk about it right now. When a guy shames another guy, the first thing, and I just saw this on Twitter about 2 hours ago, is if a guy feels shame because another guy says something to him, that itself, like pointing that out, is another form of shame. So, for instance, like I think it was either Tristan or maybe it was Andrew Tate said something to the effect that MGTOWs they bang dolls, or MGTOWs gave up, or MGTOWs this or whatever, and in all caps. And of course, I know what he's doing. He's trying to, sort of, poke the bear kind of thing, and he did successfully. And then, of course, the first questions was, well, when men, when men shame other men, aren't they resorting to female shaming tactics? Like, no, those are shaming tactics. Shaming tactics don't have a gender, man. The way that they're used contextually, yes. But shaming tactics, people shame because it works. If you are if you have a drill sergeant, and the drill sergeant, have you guys ever seen a Full Metal Jacket, right? I mean, the drill sergeant is telling you, you're a piece of crap, and blah, 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 and he's berating you. And maybe you have a mentor that's really, really tough. And I know, because I've had some really tough mentors and some tough teachers. And the way that they operate, the way that they teach you a lesson, they give you that shame, or they give you that kick in the ass that you really need, and you're going to cry. Oh, you're going to cry. Fuck you. If you have that kind of, like, guys today, particularly the past like 2 or 3 generations, don't understand the difference between a guy who is like shaming you and being hard on you, and bullying and picking on you. And because they didn't have fathers that taught them that, hey, you know what? Just because a guy is hard on you doesn't mean that he doesn't care about you. Doesn't mean that he doesn't actually want you to be a better person. He's just doing that because that's effective. So when you have a drill sergeant, when you're in the military and your CO is like hard on your ass or whatever, there's a reason for that. He wants you to be better. He wants you, but guys don't get that now, because we've been feminized for so long that we interpret, oh, he's hurting my feelings. He said something bad about me. That's female shaming. No, it's not. In fact, matter of fact, you pointing back saying that's female shaming is you shaming the guy trying to shame you. That's what I was saying, is that the actual shaming is not something that is like unique to like one particular sex. So to say, oh, that's female shaming tactics, or if only women shame, no, not at all, actually. In fact, the fact that you think that only women shame shows you just how out of touch you really are when it comes to things like shame, or understanding like how men relate as men. So keep that in mind, that when you are talking about when you're talking about somebody being hard, like, or you say a guy, like, I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm sure that there are guys who shame other guys, but this is sort of where you have to read what's going on there. Okay. You have to read what that guy is saying. Like when we talk about like a white knight who comes in to save milady's honor, and he does so by trying to shame you, maybe he's using a female, contextually female way of shaming you, because he's aligning with the feminine, and all he's doing is just parroting the same kind of crap a woman would say anyways. But the fact that he's shaming is not male or female. It's just something that men and women know is effective. We use it for kids. We use it for dogs. We use it for whatever. We use it in the military. We use it in our family. So it's not just like, oh, well, only women shame. No, they don't. Men shame too. Your mom does too. Your dad does too. Everybody does. So get that in your head. So that was number 2 was a woman's end count is irrelevant. And what this is a shame for asking. Okay. It's a distraction from parental, like, guys having an interest in their own paternity. The other thing about that, I threw this in there because I have, oh geez, man, you guys are hitting me with a shit ton here now. Thanks for that, my friend. Actually, let me answer a few before I move on. That was actually number 2. I'll move on to the other ones here in just a second. Matt Lawrence says, I get a lot of abuse and shaming for still wanting a family, even though I am older. Yes. Remember, the shaming as a tactic is used to get you to fit into an ideological alignment with that person. Sometimes shaming is to reinforce that person's ego invested beliefs. Sometimes it's to, like, people, I think a lot of people think that shaming is an attack, is always an attack, or it's always an insult. It's not always an insult. When it comes from women, like, women will say, well, who hurt you? Why are you so bitter? Remember that what that is it's a defense that shaming is actually a defense mechanism for the way that person believes. You don't believe what I believe. Why? There must be something wrong with you. What is this one? Michael says, started spinning plates recently, but when went on a dating app, I saw one of them on there. Immediate reaction was jealousy. Sat back to wonder why. Thoughts? Yeah, of course it's jealousy, because you had at least some sort of interest in getting with that person. And so when All right, I'm just going to be really brief here because this is technically off topic, but I'll be really brief. When even if you are friends with even a guy, this is one of the reasons why guys can't be like real friends with women, is because when you develop some sort of relationship with that person, even if you think it's platonic, there is a sense of masculine protection. There's a sense of ownership over that person. I don't mean ownership in the sense like, oh, she's mine. I mean, it's like there's an extension of yourself that wants to believe that maybe, in assuming you're attracted to the person, that there's going to be something for you in the future. And to see that interest in other guys, that stimulates most guys' competition, you wanting to defeat a rival kind of thing. And as a result, that suspicion and that jealousy comes because on some level of consciousness, you wanted to believe that that person that woman had the capacity to send you honest signals, that you were believing that she was sending you honest signals. This is sort of like, I talk about the female hypergamous filter all the time, but it's not so much a hypergamous filter. It's this if men have a filter, it's a filter for filtering who is going to who's not going to cuckold them, who is going to be a good investment for their own paternity into. And I think that on some level of consciousness, even it's an acquaintance, right? You want, and she's hot for some guy that you don't think is good for her. That protectiveness means that you thought that she was deserving of your investment, your parental investment on some level of consciousness. She proves that she's not. And now you kind of go, it's you realizing that there was I want to say dishonest cues, but you misread those cues. And that's why you get jealous. That's why you get suspicious. There's your $5 answer, your $10 answer for $5, man. NB says, so how can you tell the difference when a guy is a ball busting and actually is trying to bully you? You know what? I'll tell you what's funny, NB, is that there used to be a time where you wouldn't even, that question wouldn't even be asked. I don't know if you've watched, if you watch any old, like, I don't know, maybe this is a bad example, but like if you look at like something like a show like Band of Brothers, or you look at a show like The Pacific, which I just watched about a few months ago. I watched actually I almost binge watched the whole thing. I really liked that show, the Pacific. And it was like, it's of course like, the Marines in Guadalcanal and the Pacific Theater in World War II. And you look at the way that the characters interact with each other. And these are like real people because they did the interviews of the actual men before they died. But in some cases, but the interaction, excuse me, and the vernacular and everything that they're using, the guys they had an instinctive understanding. And now today, I think for the last like 4 generations, guys don't realize when somebody's busting their nuts and when somebody is actually trying to shame them. Because I think right now, because men have become so feminized, we adopt the feminine contextual way of shaming. And we adopt the idea that if we shame like a woman, that it will endear us, or it will put us into a better position to have women like us. Like that's really the whole thing about identification. I have it's in the very first chapters of my first book, and it's one of the first essays that I wrote way back in 2011. It's called Identity Crisis. And that's a good question, because you need to understand why guys identify with women, or they think that that's the best way to solve their reproductive problems, is because socially, the village, feminine imperative, the blue pill, whatever you want to call it, the old order, old social contract, teaches guys that the more like a woman they are, the more they identify with a woman, even like now to the point of becoming a woman. But the more they can be sensitive to women, the more they can promote women, they can empower women, they can be sensitive to the things that they want, the more that they can facilitate a woman's success, the more they identify with being feminine, the more they believe that to be feminine and not masculine is the correct thing to do, the more they identify, and that's why I called it identity crisis, the more they identify with the feminine, the better off they'll be. The better, that's pretty much the basis of what I call what blue pill game is, right? Or beta game, blue pill game, is that the more alike with a woman you are, like likes attract, right? No, they don't actually. Opposites attract. But guys have been taught through Disney and through pop culture and through music and through stories and movies and whatever, that the more they're alike to a woman, the more genuine and authentic a person they are. And that if they do that, and men, of course, we have our reproductive imperative is like an order of magnitude more than women's and girls, because our sexuality is always on. Women's is filtered. Women's is cyclic. A woman has to decide who she's going to have sex with. Where a guy is like rocking and ready to go all the time. Well, we're taught to feel guilt about that. We're taught to feel shame about our sexual expressions. We're taught to feel shame as men. We're taught to feel shame of having any kind of self-confidence in ourselves. Like, you're arrogant. Oh, you like. There was a time, I think, in the 80s, like a lot of guys maybe are unfamiliar with this, but like, you got a rock star on stage. You got David Lee Roth on stage. You got like I'm trying to think who else would be a good example of this. Mick Jagger, right? You got Robert Plant. You got Roger Daltrey or whatever. You got these guys who own the fucking world on stage. They are the showmen. They direct the show. They're the guys that are right there, and they are full of themselves, and rightfully so. That is like almost a foreign thought to most guys today, because we think that we ought to be ashamed of ourselves for being arrogant, for being full of ourselves, for having some sort of even recognition of our own greatness, right? If I think that I'm a great guy, for me to go and say I'm a great guy, that makes me see I should be ashamed of myself for thinking that. And remember, the reason I'm bringing this up is because guys today have adopted a female mindset, because we've been taught that the way to reproduce and to solve our reproductive problems is to become more like women. Well, as a part of becoming more like women, we adopt the ideas that we should defend women based on what women tell us is going to make us men and make us manly. If we do what they say, if we adopt femininity or female mindset as the correct way of thinking, then we're more likely to find a woman who's going to appreciate us for being such a great guy, or for being such a good feminine identifying guy. That's why really this is the basis of what most male feminists believe. It's the sneaky guy game. I think it was Jordan Peterson was saying that it's the sneaky guy game who tries to to ape the behaviors and try to be on team woman. And women hate that. They absolutely hate that, because there's nothing worse than a nice guy who's pretending to be a nice guy. Or they like, what's funny now is, like, if you're a nice guy, if you're a genuine nice guy, I feel real bad for you, because nobody likes you. Even the women who you think like you for being a nice guy, they don't think you're actually a nice guy. They think you're sending false signals. They don't think that there is such a thing as a nice guy, because all nice guys just want to get in her pants. And the reason that you're a nice guy and she doesn't want you to get in her pants is because you're sending false signals, and you're tripping that hypergamous filter. So anyways, so how do you tell the difference? I think one of the reasons why we have a problem, or you're even asking this question, MB, is because we are in a social order right now where we condition it out. Like, it's instinctually, you should know as a guy whether you're getting bullied or you're getting your ass beat. And then there's the guys who are just like, you're ribbing you, right? You play a team sport, you probably know that guys insult other guys as a form of affection. And really what it is the testing of that guy. So even to some degree, even bullying is a form of testing that guy. Now, it's a bad way of doing it, of course, but there is a way that men instinctually test one another for dependability. If I'm in a fight, I want to know that you got my back. So I'm gonna to have my back. That's how guys do it. Men do. Women talk, men do. And so how do you do that now? Well, I mean, it's almost like we have to relearn this. There's a social aspect and there's an instinctual aspect to it. So that's kind of off topic today, but that's okay. Giuseppe, thank you for that $400 thing. Okay, I guess now I have to read this. We need to destroy the feminine primary social order and bring back masculinity. Agreed. Teach boys to be masculine and mental point of origin. Yes. I spoke to women surprising they want a masculine world. Yes, they do now. They most definitely do now. but they want their choices respected and treated fairly in a masculine society. Well, okay, I get. Well, we'll come back to that. I'm a moderate and want to find a peaceful solution. Okay, well, the problem with that is, Giuseppe, is that at some point, where does the and this was actually part of what I was going to talk about today. At what point does masculine authority override women's authority, or your utopian egalitarian, world? To get to bring back masculinity, conventional masculinity. First of all, I don't think you're ever going to have a concerted effort to bring back conventional masculinity. If it comes, it will come as a result of a trauma, which is what we're seeing right now, which is why I was laughing about that, because right now women want this. We want a masculine world. We want to be in a masculine world. Sure, they do. They want this. They want security at this point. That's it. Right now, we're living worldwide. We're living in a time that is very insecure. It's very chaotic. Thanks for that. I see you, Sam. We're living in a very insecure world at this point. So when you say we need to get back to some sort of parity. It'd be great to go back to this utopian way where women instinctually understand that they are complements to men's lives, and men are complements, and we get back to this natural kind of complementarity. That'd be great. I don't think you're going to see that unless outside of a crisis, outside of the meteor hitting, or outside of the pandemic hitting. I don't think you're going to see that as a concentrated effort. This is what throws a lot of guys off. Is yes, feminism was something that upset the gender balance, and it continues to today. But it was only upset because we could afford to have it upset. Now we can't, and now you see that women revert back to this conventional sense of what it is they want. Well, we want strong men to protect us. Yeah, I'm sure you do. Until such time as everything becomes a little bit more secure for them, and then then it's oppression. And I think that if we learn anything from this pandemic, if we learn it, I'm going to do a show about this probably on Friday. If we learn anything from this pandemic, we need to understand that it is revealing the true natures of not just men and women, but like just them as individuals, but also as their individual sexes. I keep getting these guys sending me these articles about, this isolation is going to cause it's cause one of two things. It's going to cause a baby boom because all you have to do is because people are so unimaginative that all they do is get horny and bang all day, or else it's going to see a peak and a spike in divorces, which is also probably true. Actually, I would agree. Both of those situations will probably happen. I don't think it will be one or the other. I think it will be both. Because why? Well, because now the future is uncertain. We haven't been uncertain about a future in a long time. I watched if you ever watch any old war movie, like I was watching Midway recently. I thought it was a really good movie. I thought it was pretty well. I've seen the original too. There was an original movie of it, which was I think it was in the 70s. And that was one of the first movies I saw as a kid, and I thought it was really great. But this one was pretty good too. But what kind of struck me about this, and I didn't really think about this, but at that time, the Americans who were in the South Pacific, and they were on the aircraft carriers, they were in the Enterprise and blah, blah, blah. There was genuine concern that if they didn't do their job, and if they didn't kick ass, and they didn't hit back on the Japanese, that the Japanese would be lying off of San Francisco and blowing the hell out of their loved ones, or coming back to Hawaii and destroying Hawaii, or laying off of Los Angeles and lobbing shells into the city. Right? That was actually a real concern for these guys. I didn't really think about it because, hey, we won the war. It's like thinking about I'm going to be really American here, but this is like thinking about the American Revolution, or the War of Independence, however you want to call it. We already know how it ends. We already know how Vietnam War ends. We already know how Civil War ends, or World War I. We know how those end. We know that it's like the Titanic. At the end of the movie, the ship goes down. We know what happens. But we don't realize that at the time, the people going through that didn't realize that. They didn't know. Everything was very uncertain. They thought that was their ass. And if they didn't do it, then that was their ass, and that was their kid's ass, and that was their wife's ass, and that was everybody's ass if they hadn't done that. So, even in those situations that we think is a foregone conclusion, it certainly wasn't for those people at that time. And that changes you, and that changes your behavior. And that's what I'm talking about with this whole thing. And I think, and on a grand scope of things, yeah, I mean, I get, we're all sheltering. I've never had to do this in my life. I've never been through like a global crisis in my lifetime. I mean, we had the Gulf War, okay, and that seems so far away, and other people are doing it. It didn't really affect my day-to-day thing, but now this is, and it's affecting everybody's outlook because you can't escape it. And women are in the same boat right now. And so you're going to see we kind of revert back to our natural, evolved, conventional types, when we are put into that crisis situation. I'll get into that a little bit more on Friday. Thanks for that super chat, though, Giuseppe. I have to read it in my Italian voice, which is really bad. If her body can't. Oh, sorry, let me put that on. All right, I'm just going to answer some of these here real quick. I got two more here before I got to get to these before I go to the super chats here. I know we're getting down to the wire here. If her body count shouldn't count, why should that? What's in your bank account? Very funny, very clever. You're a poet, dude. Number 3 was men are commitment-phobic. Men have fragile egos. Men have unrealistic, socially constructed beauty standards. All of these are based on the same type of shame. And again, we're talking about female shame of men. You should be committed to that woman. And in fact, pretty much in all of these, they're based on the same thing. Do what she says. If you want to be a real man, do what she says. Men are commitment-phobic. A real man isn't. Men have fragile egos, right? Oh, yeah, well, you don't want to crush their poor little childlike egos. What is that shame meant to do? Well, it's meant to get you to do what they want to do. You don't hear these. The ones I have listed here for number 3 are all things that you're probably going to hear from older women who are certainly past the epiphany phase. And the epiphany phase is 29 to 31 years old for women, or after that. And a lot of guys say, well, that's after the wall. Well, it depends on what the wall really is for that woman. But yeah, to an extent. You don't hear women who are like 23 years old going, men are commitment phobic. I want them to do what I want them to do, which is wife me up. Or men have such fragile egos. All women, or is it, the beauty standards thing is laughable today, because we can see just what the difference is in beauty standards between men and women. Like if you go and you look at pornography, there's a million different niches of pornography that guys get off to, like fat women, skinny women, white women, black women, pasty women, midgets, blue-haired women, blondes, big boobs, little boobs, every color of the rainbow, man. There is a fetish for a guy. Ladies, trust me, it doesn't matter what you're at. There's probably a niche of porn for the way that you look right now. So keep that in mind the next time you go, oh, men have such unrealistic beauty standards. I'll never live up to that. Bullshit. Trust me, there's probably a dating site just for your kind of girl. Like big, beautiful women, bam, there you go. Because guys tend to go with what has been reproductively successful for them in the past. So I'm just sort of debunking that whole myth, because women use that as a shaming tactic on guys. You have an unrealistic beauty standard that was built for you by social construction. No, actually, my beauty standard, my innate beauty standard, is to look for youth, beauty, and fertility. That's why most men want a woman guys between the ages of 15 and 115 want a girl who is right about 22, 23 years old, which is why I say that's your sexual market value peak in all my work. So with that in mind, yeah, from a naturalist, from an evolved sense, yes, men want that. They're looking for a girl like that. But you know what? Men's sexual nature, men's the masculine imperative, right? Men's innate mating strategy is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality, and no one's ugly after 2 a.m. So guys, and I'm going to debunk something right now, because I've heard a certain PUA saying that, oh, he's succumbing to his own masculine hypergamy. No, dude, only women are hypergamous. I'll tell you why. because women have an attraction floor. Women only want to get with guys who are at or above their own sexual market value. Men don't have that. A guy who is a 7 will be happy to get with a 6 or a 5 in a pinch. He'd rather have an 8, maybe even a 9 if he can get to it. But again, men's sexuality is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. That's their mating strategy. So to say that, oh, men have to, or women have to be hypogamous, or stop making up bullshit. Okay. Stop making it up. Just like understand how men's evolved nature works. Again, pornography isn't this multi-bazillion-dollar ubiquitous free streaming juggernaut because guys are hypogamous, right? Because guys are hypergamy too. Everybody, I should clarify this. Everybody makes comparisons. Men, women, children, and higher order animals make comparisons. They understand a big apple versus a little mealy, wormy, scrawny apple. Which one's better for their survival? Well, the bigger apple. Like a dog knows that. A child knows that. That's making comparisons. That's not hypergamy. Hypergamy is way different. I talked about this in the misconceptions of hypergamy video that I did a while back. So if you're interested in that, there you go. All right. You know what? Here's the other ones. I'm just going to run through these really quick. Oh, the other one was this. Like I was saying before, these are shaming tactics that women will use when they are at a certain age. So one of those other ones, I just said beauty standards. The next one was men should date age appropriately, right? Oh, you need to date a girl who is your proper age. Well, it used to be, what is it, half plus 7? Anybody remember half plus 7? It used to be like half your age and then you add 7 to that, and that was supposed to be age appropriate. Well, unfortunately, that's not how things work, actually. Women tend to prefer a guy who is anywhere between 3 to 7 years older than them, preferably 5 to 7, but it can be as much as like 3 above their own age. And the reason for that is because, again, women are hypergamous. Okay. They're looking for a guy who's already made. They're looking for a guy who their innate hypergamous sense doesn't have to guess at. They want the guy, like Rich Cooper says this all the time, is that women don't care about your struggles as a man. They wait at the finish line and they bang the winners. Okay. I agree with that, but I also understand that not all women can do that. And so therefore, as part of their hypergamous filtering, they have to make concessions for guys, and they have to look for a good prospect. They have to look for a guy who's going to be a winner, right? Oh, he's coming up in the pack. He looks pretty good, and he probably is going to be a winner once he gets to be 36, 37 years old. I'll get with him now, and then I'll be a winner because I invested in him early on, right? That's also a thing as well. And that requires women to have a good intuition, quote unquote, feminine intuition, right? So they have to understand that guy, hopefully he's got some prospects for him. But the guy who's already there, or the guy who's close to making it, or the guy who is more mature, it takes long. Women instinctively know that it takes men longer to become men. Like the joke is, men don't become men till they're 30. That's why when a woman gets to be in her epiphany phase, she's looking for the guy who's already made, because she doesn't want to do the guesswork. She can't afford to do the guesswork. She probably could have in her 25, 26, 27, she probably could have done that. But because of the social order we're in, and we encourage women to go, bang the chads when they're in their party years, and then, cash out with a beta when they get to their epiphany phase. They could have done that, but they didn't. They decided that for whatever reason that they were going to explore their options and maybe not get married at all, and follow along with whatever social convention taught them that they should feel good for that. But the fact of the matter is this, is that women tend to date older anyways. I'll give you one real quick comparison here. If you go and you look at how pissed off women are when they see that Leonardo DiCaprio pretty much only gets with girls between the ages of like 22, and I think the oldest girl he got with was like 27. But most of them are like right around 23 to 24, 25. And I'm not, that might not even be something that he consciously does. It's just, that's what he's into, right? And then you look at Keanu Reeves and his girlfriend, who looks like she's his mother. And women love that. They go, oh, it's so great. I love him that much more. He's with an age appropriate woman. Oh, that horrible Leonardo DiCaprio. He's a beast. He's a beast. I don't know what to do about it. You'll see that, and there's a shame there. Now, remember, when women are throwing those things out, when they're saying stuff like that, it's not because they actually care. It's because they want guys around them to feel shame for thinking like Leonardo and not like Keanu. You need to do what best fits my imperatives. Again, a man's not a man unless he does what I tell him to do. That's where if there's a female context to shame, that's it. Men need to do what I tell them to do. All right. Let's see. So it's women in the past. So I talked about that. And the last one that I have on my list right here, and this is the fun one, is you have a little dick. I'll bet you have a little dick. You have a micro ween. Are you compensating for something? Who hurt you? You're going to be alone forever. And yes, guys use this one too. I remember that all of these are not necessarily female ways of shaming, but they are based on the same principle. That if I'm a man and I shame you by saying, I bet you have a little dick, or if I'm a man and I say, who hurt you? I'm aligning with the purpose of that shame, the latent purpose of that shame, which is to get you to align yourself with whatever is in the best interest of women. And most guys don't realize it. And particularly old blue pill guys. We talk about like blue pill alphas who are like the worst white knights in the world. The reason why that they're so annoying is because what they're trying to do is to get that guy back onto the plantation through shame. And that's why I think a lot of guys say, well, that's feminine shaming. And maybe it is. It's a guy that's using it. It's not necessarily, it's a feminine methodology, I guess, but it serves the feminine purpose. So if a blue pill alpha or one of these holier than thou, pontificating, tradcon guys as well, the Lord wants you to marry these single mothers, that's would be the right thing to do. Okay, well, that's shame. And what does that shame serve? It serves the feminine. You'll never see, very, very rarely will you see any, particularly from tradcons, you will never see them shame women for being women. It will not be and if they do, there'll be 10 more tradcons that shame him for shaming the woman. Because men shaming women is antithetical to solving the reproductive problem. So you always, like, I don't care who, but like guys will say, well, I'm a conservative guy, or not in my church. We're Orthodox here. We would never allow women to preach. But you'll see that even in those quote unquote Orthodox organizations, and I don't care what religion it is, you will see that at the end of the day, the shame that they use is used. What's the purpose of the shame? Is the purpose of the shame meant to better you as a man, or is it to get you back on the plantation? Is it meant to help you? Or is it meant to correct the behavior or the thinking of a woman, of a man, of a child? Is it meant to do that, or are you doing that because you are trying to align them back onto your way of thinking? All right, so anyways, here's some other ones. You're gonna be alone forever if you believe that. That's a really good one. If you believe that, you should be ashamed to believe that. You have meaningless sex. You don't know how many girls I had really great sex with, or what was meaningful and what was not. So if I go and I remember when I told Pat Campbell, I said, I've been with like 40 plus women, like 43 women. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you'd say something. He's humble bragging, right? As a guy, you cannot say I had X amount of women, because there'll be, first of all, the women will kind of raise an eyebrow, but mostly the guys will try to shame you. And the reason why do guys shame other guys when it comes to stuff like that? Well, because that's sexual competition. That's saying I have more sexual prowess than you. Oh yeah, you're humble bragging, dude. Oh, those are all meaningless bar skanks that you had. Like, that's a guy shaming another guy. They're using a female tactic to do it, but they're shaming that other guy because that guy gets more ass than they do. I'll tell you something that here's a funny story is I remember when I was about 21, 22, and I was playing the Hollywood metal scene, and I never really, I didn't understand it then. I do get it now though. But like when I would show up at like, it wasn't be at a club, but if I was at a social gathering, if I was at a bar and grill, or if I was just out somewhere, I could be just walking, somewhere, and I would have guys who would just like say, "Oh man, look at that bag, look at that guy, look at that dude over there. What's wrong with that guy?" And they would, "Oh, he looks like Fabio, whatever, that kind of stuff." They try to like point fingers and try to shame you, kind of thing. I thought about that and I go, or they would say, "Oh, guys into that metal music, they're all the same," that kind of stuff. I never really understood that, but it was really more out of a need to not so much to shame me, but to sort of reinforce their idea that a guy like that getting that much ass. I can understand with a guy who has, long hair, purple hair, maybe you're a punk rock or whatever. I don't know, whatever. That guy lives a pretty free lifestyle, and most guys can't do that. So they've got to find some sort of way to sort of reinforce their own, belief in themselves, I guess. And how do they do that? Well, they do that by shame. And I'm not saying I wouldn't shame back, but I do understand the need or the impetus for doing that. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to go through our super chats here. I got a few minutes left, so I probably missed a few of these. Avi Young says, "Did you get my email regarding coaching?" Yes, I did, Avi. I am going to do some coaching, but I probably won't start until next week. I don't know. Don't call it coaching, dude, because I don't coach. I'll be happy to listen to what you want to tell me, and I'll give you my analysis of it. But I'm not going to, and I counsel. Let's just say that. Okay, but yeah, I did. Hit me up again. Hit me up again like the end of this week, maybe in the beginning of next week. I would do it, but I'm really deep in the book right now, and I don't when I get in the zone, I don't want to do much of any. I don't even want to do video when I'm in the zone writing, but hit me up at like the end of the week. Let's see. Abby, yeah, I did get that. Amos Joseph says, "Could you use a delivery service or get some carry-out sushi?" No, unfortunately, I don't know if I would trust sushi like that. I mean, it is Reno, but I don't know why, but Reno is like the capital of all-you-can-eat sushi. And like, as far as I know, I lived in Florida, and I thought maybe there'd be some great sushi, and there's a few, but there's nothing like they have in Reno. I don't know why it is so popular here, but it is. Tiger the Brave says, "We'll see." Oh, okay. So I already asked. I got yours. What else did I get to? What's your thoughts on? Arnold says, "What's your thoughts on women wanting to eat at fancy restaurants?" Okay, that was that one. I didn't answer that one. I will get to that. I had some people saying, I think it was Jack Napier said, like, we're debating on whether a guy should pay for a restaurant date or a dinner date. And I'm kind of two minds about this right now. Maybe you guys can help me clarify it. And if you want to talk about it in the description or in the comments, that'd be fine too. I'm of the opinion that guys need to pay for dates if they're going to go date. And simply because, based on the idea that when you go on a date, a traditional, like a traditional conventional date where you say, "Hey, let's meet up and go do this." First of all, I think restaurant dates are a bad idea, period. But if you're going to do that, you pay for it. And then to the point where, like, that, let me just explain my thinking here, because a lot of guys will say, "Well, that sounds like you're paying for pussy, man. You're a pussy beggar." No, I'm not. I'm saying what that does is it establishes frame. And it says, look, I'm so much in control of my world that I don't even think twice about paying for a date. Now, that doesn't mean be stupid, okay? Because that's the first thing people said. Well, she's just going to take you for a ride, man. To look at all these girls. They're what it was. A foodie call. What's a foodie call? A foodie call is when when a girl like uses that beta chump for a free meal. And you know what? You're a chump if you continue to do that. You fool me once kind of thing. I still think that guys need to be in control of their dating situation. And the other thing is, if you're going to do that in the first place, I have had this argument. I've debated this actually with the guys on Rule Zero and earlier. that if you are the kind of guy who suggests going on a restaurant date, that almost puts you into the category of you're a beta, just for suggesting that you go have a restaurant date. And because everybody will say this, and this is, we got into this debate as well, is that if you're suggesting that, you're already presuming a transactional nature for that interaction, because alphas wouldn't do that. An alpha would go on a drink date or would meet her somewhere, and then if it led to sex, it led to sex. And that's all. That was like the whole point of meeting up. So if a girl's really that into you and she has genuine desire for you and you're hot, and of course, all the looks maxers will say, well, she just wants to bang you. She sees you on sight. She just wants to do it. Well, okay, let's just say for sake of argument, that's true. I don't believe it is, but let's say it's true. Just suggesting, even if you're the guy that she wants to bang, just suggesting, hey, why don't we go have coffee, or why don't we go have a dinner together? Just doing that puts you in like boyfriend mode. That puts you in, oh, he's boyfriend material because he suggested this kind of a date, rather than a booty call, rather than Netflix and chill, rather than, oh, let's meet up for drinks and then go bang afterwards. I really need to do an episode about like dating tactics, or like what happens, like how to read a woman, or how to read a dating situation. Because a lot of guys, and it kind of goes back to what we talked about on the body language episode on Sunday, is that most guys don't know how to read women, or they don't know how to read the social situation. If you are going out on food dates, if you're going out on restaurant dates, the likelihood that you're going to get laid after that is next to nil, unless she's really into you, unless she will forgive that, and because you're so hot and she's so into you that she wants to get with you. And why do I say that? Well, because if you're with a chick and she like eats more than you, like most women don't want to eat more than a guy on a date anyways, because, and if they do, if a woman like packs down a hamburger or a burrito or something like that while you're on your first date, you pretty much aren't going to get laid, because no woman wants to have sex on a full stomach, like especially like a really full stomach like that. And no woman wants to have sex with a guy that she's really into when her breath smells like onions and pickles and everything, all that kind of stuff. The other thing I wanted to say is, like, I've heard guys say this as well, and then I'll move on to the next one here, but I've heard guys say this as well, is that, and I've seen this happen, is I know guys who will meet girls at clubs and they'll be like 2 a.m. and maybe they're a little tipsy, maybe they're not, maybe they're with a group, maybe they're not, but they'll say, let's go get Taco Bell, or let's go get, insert whatever food, late night food. If a woman suggests that you go get pizza or whatever at like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m, you are not getting laid, because that is her sober up meal, is what that is. If a woman suggests, hey, let's go get, Del Taco or whatever, I don't know whatever it is in your area. No woman wants to have sex with you when her breath smells, that she really wants to have sex. She doesn't want to get with the guy if her breath smells like onions, garlic. So understand it's also known as a filibuster. So women will if a woman knows that you want to have sex with her, she'll do things so that, like I said, medium is the message. She'll do things so that you'll get the message that you're not going to have sex with her. And one of those, the easiest filibuster, is it's 2:30 a.m. You just got out of the club, or you're going home, or you don't know what to do, and she suggests, hey, let's go to In-N-Out Burger. Say good night right there. Just you're done, because pretty much you're done. So ways to read things here. Now there's going to be some guy who's going to go, hey man, I do it all the time. No, you don't. Let's see, what else do I got here? Adam says, let's see, Adam Arnold said that. Zuko Fred says, hello, Rollo. I discovered the red pill about 2 months ago. I'm in an LTR right now. My girl has noticed differences in my behavior. She also hates it, and it seems we are always fighting now. Yeah. She hates it because you are uncontrollable. You're not something, you've become unpredictable. Now, how do you fix that? Well, first of all, you insist on frame. You might have to just simply drop her. Okay. Just consider that. Okay, so let's just say that's on the table as well. But the other thing is that you have to give it some time, and you have to stick to it, Because here's the thing is if you decide, oh, well, I really am reading this new material and it's really changing who I am, blah, blah, blah. I get it. But now I'm going to go back to the way I was. That is even worse than if you had stuck to your guns and you stuck to it and say, you know what, this is who I am. And this is what I'm about. And this is what I need from a woman if she's going to be in my life. And this is the direction that I'm going. And if you want to come along, you want to be part of my frame, fine. If not, fine. Comply or goodbye. But if you go back, if you go, oh, it's okay. I was just trying it out. I didn't know what this red pill stuff was. If you do that, you're going to be a world of hurt. You're going to be way worse off that way than if you had gone through. So you know what? There's only one way forward. Either drop her drop her and go forward, or just keep her and go forward. There's no going back. Adam says, for those that have been raised on a strong diet of internet porn and video games, millennials, yes, how can we develop a social agility that we need to interact better with women? It's too easy to fall into the black pill. Yes, it definitely is. Well, how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to change your mind about yourself. That's really the basis of all change. But you have to decide that you're going to be something different, or you're going to try something different. I'm not a motivational speaker, and I don't think that really that motivational speaking does much for anybody. You can go to pep rallies all day long, if that's what you get off on. But at the end of the day, when you're home and it's 2 a.m. and you're staring at the ceiling in the dark and you say, hey, I really needed to do this, or I need to get back to that, or I need to change something about my life. It's on you, man. It's not on Tony Robbins. It's not on, RSD, whoever the fuck. Okay. It's on you. You get to decide, and you have to make those decisions. And that's really the hardest part. Well, guys want to know, well, how come Rollo doesn't give us prescription? It doesn't give us 12 years of life, man. I want to live better. I want to live the Rollo Tomassi way. I don't want you to. I don't really want you to be a Rollo Tomassi man. I don't want that to be, I want you to build your own self. But again, that comes from you deciding to change your mind about yourself and live in a different way. How do you get the social agility? You practice it. Put yourself into situations where you have to, pass or fail. And you're probably going to fail a lot. And that's a good thing, because you learn from that. And if you're not learning from that and you go back into your blue pill nihilism, then that's the only real way that you're going to fail. You can sit there and jerk off, and you can sit there and play video games all day long. Everybody's doing that right now. Right? Well, why should today be any different? That's what we were doing before the pandemic, right? I'm gonna go play Call of Duty. All right, go rub one out after that. Why should today be any different? So maybe now you use this time to sort of like reflect on like where it is and what you want to do. Like, I said this from the very beginning, that, and if you've read my first book, it's in the first couple of chapters, is buffers are dangerous, man. You need to, there's still to this day, and I remember I published this in 2013, but I wrote it back in 2008. Buffers are something you need to be aware of, because too many guys there's an over reliance on buffers, particularly digital ones. We're doing one right now. There's a buffer between me and you. See, and that camera right there, that's our buffer. It's like the third wall. I can talk to you and you feel like, oh, I know this dude. If you came in this room right now, I'd be like, who the fuck are you? But we have this familiarity, right? Everybody watching this is very familiar with me. I should go and give you a tour of my studio here. That'd be great. But you don't really know me. I have a really great post, a really great essay. Take a drink now. Called We Are Who We Say We Are online. And we live sort of this with this personality, this persona out. It's what I call our digital consciousness. You need to disengage from your digital consciousness and get into your real consciousness. And that means going out and doing stuff. That means creating new tribes and getting out into like social situations where you're probably going to be uncomfortable because you feel unprepared for it, because all you're doing is this right here. So get yourself out there. You have to change your mind about yourself, and then you have to get out and you have to experience things and be okay with it. Come back. You're not going to learn how to this social agility or whatever that you think that you really need. And you know what? Here's the thing. let's just say this. Let's say you did develop that social agility. If I gave you this magic pill that says, here, you have all that social agility or that social intelligence that you lacked before. Congratulations. If you don't change your mind about yourself, you're just going to go back in, play Call of Duty, and rub one out. So, whether you have it or you don't, it still requires you to get out there. Now, what are you going to do with it? Jack Donovan talks about this all the time. It's like, we got guys who go to the gym all the time and they pack on all this muscle and they look bodybuilders and everything. What are you doing it for? Why do you need this? Particularly in this day and age, you know where your next meal's coming from. You don't have to kill saber-toothed tigers anymore. But guys want to look buff. Yeah, well, I do it for my health. I do it for me. You do it because the chick gets off on it. That's why you started doing it. Maybe you do it for yourself too, but you don't need to do it, but you do it. Change your mind about yourself. If that's what you want to do, if that's how you want to look, you can do it. Anybody can do anything, man. Just get out there and go. But guys, unless you have some physical disability or some mental disability, and even then, you probably can make the best of that. Play to your strengths. Rollo, okay, I did yours. So hi, Rollo, okay, I talked about survival functions. Vinny, I got to yours. Knowledge Seeker, I got to yours. Mo, I got to yours. Travis, I got to yours. Rick Johnson says, my boss always sides with random women over me. Doesn't that suck? That's when guys like in that feminine mindset or believes that he needs to identify or he agrees with a woman. Like that's like what's expected of him. You want to know why female shame or the latent function of it is to get your boss to do exactly what he's doing as his default. Tiger the Brave says, how can I stop my teenage students filtering with me? I don't know. I'm not really sure what you meant by that, my friend. Filtering with me. I don't know why. Why would you want to? You Blink says, the greatest triumph for a cheating. Okay, wait, I got to you. I read yours. I put yours out there. Graham, I put yours on. Matt Lawrence, I get a lot of abuse and shaming for still wanting a family. Okay, I got to that. Michael Mawaro says, started spinning plates recently, but when on a dating app, I saw one. Okay, I talked to you about that one. NB, I got to you. And I did pretty good. Giuseppe, I talked to you. Drape Tillman, I put yours up there. Body count. Let's see. PBC Coder says, here's an offering to the tech gods, getting rid of the lag. Yeah, I wish. What's funny is what is it? StreamYard, who's what I use for this program and all my streams. Even they're noticing that we're getting throttled back. I don't know if it's a thing that is because there's more traffic on YouTube and all these other things, or if it's Google and YouTube actually throttling back this kind of content, which I would say is probably both. Can you make a show? Oh, Dennis says, can you make a show about praxology? Okay, I could do that. That's probably something that I need to get to. You've mentioned it before, started reading about it from an economic view. Yeah, I mean, praxology is not just about red pill, although I know I use it like that all the time. Praxology can apply to all kinds of different things. I will. I'll give that some thought, man. Alex Files for that $20. Thank you for that $20, my friend. He says, hey, Rollo, I'm being shamed by a woman. What is the best way to approach them and also stop it from happening and or turn it into an opportunity? There you go. Okay, here we go. So here's the thing. And I know I start every sentence with that goddamn phrase. Here's the thing. If you are being shamed, if you think you're being shamed, you need to be able to determine whether or not that's a shit test or if that is just somebody who just wants to feel better about themselves or wants to get sort of attaboys. Particularly when it's online. If you're being shamed live and in public, that's different than if you go on Twitter and they go, you shouldn't think that. That's because when people try to shame you on Twitter, when women try to shame you on Twitter, they're going like this. Hey, everybody, look at this. Imagine being this guy. Like they start with imagine, right? Imagine. Hey, everybody, look at this. Shame this guy right here. Because, okay, so why would somebody do that? Whether it's a man or a woman, in this case, let's say it's a woman. Why would that? What's the latent purpose of that? It's to make them feel better about their own ideological frame, because what you're saying, it sounds wrong. You look like the enemy. You look like somebody that their teachers taught them to look for as their opposition. as the person that should be opposed to them, that the evil one, like the obstacle kind of person. Like, imagine being like thinking like this. I can't believe it. And that happens not just with like your liberal, leftist SJW friends. It also happens from like the other side too. Like, Christian conservatives, trad cons will do the same thing. Hey, imagine being like this guy having meaningless sex all the time. They'll use it. It's the same shame. It's just, comes from a different context. The question is, why are you being done? Why is that being done to you? Usually, if it's online, it's because that somebody wants that reinforcement and they want to get that, oh yeah, you're thinking the right way. Good for you. That's what they want at the end of the day. So that's where that shame comes from. Now, if you're being shamed live and in real time, and you need to be able to have the nuance and the understanding to read what's going on. Are you actually being shamed? Because 9 times out of 10, when people shame you, it's because they want to get attaboys or they want to get affirmation from outside sources. They don't give a rat's ass about you. They just want to feel good about, oh yeah, you're right. He should be shamed. Oh yeah, he should be shamed. And everybody comes in, right? You can do that live or online. Mostly it's online. But when somebody's shaming you, like person to person, where is that coming from? Is it coming from a woman? Like in this case, you're saying it comes from a girl. So if it comes from a girl, how do you use it? Well, you agree and amplify. That's one technique. You go, yeah, you're right, man. I'm just shameless. That's just me. I'm just shameless. Oh, should I feel shame about that? Because I don't, or you can use amused mastery. I'm sure you think that. I'm sure you think that I should be ashamed. I'm sure that you believe that. Yeah, you have the amuse. I really got to do a show on like these on counter tactics or on like more subtle ways of using game. Agree and amplify is one. Cocky funny is another. Neg hits. Everybody knows what neg hits are. Turning it around. It kind of depends on what the shame is, and then using that to your advantage. So think of it in these terms. I'll just leave it at this. Think of if somebody throws shame at you, you need to be into jujitsu. You need to use your opponent's energy against them. So you say, yes, you're right, I am. And you're pointing it out. So that makes you the asshole. And you flip it around. You're using your opponent's energy against them. Think of it in those terms. And then again, I'm going to have to do a episode that's based on just like tactics. And I really need to do a game episode. I know people are going to throw rocks at me for it, but I think I might do one. All right. Let's see. Carl Bennington says male anger, repress or attract women. You know what, Carl? Since we're getting down to the wire here, I have 3 articles about anger that address this specifically. So go on the Rational Male, type in anger, and the first 3 will pop up. Just anything that has anger. I think one's called the anger bias. The other one is just called anger management, and there might be another one in there as well. Go look at that. It's that really is anger is kind of like deserving of its own show. Everything's deserving of its own show, right? One Man's Way, who I still have here. Amuse mastery seems to work well against individual women's shaming, but if she has friends around, she will continue to shame and not let up. The hive mind is undefeated. Yes, as I was saying before, and this kind of addressed your point, is that the reason why women shame is first of all, they're looking if they're with their girls and they're shaming you, they're doing that because first of all, makes them feel good to like turn you into a beta, to confirm their hypergamous filter that you are a beta, that you are a chump, that you are not satisfactory enough for them to want to have sex with, and they like throwing shame at you. That's just vicious insulting, and that's why like the last thing here is this is intersexual combat is what this ends up being. And so one thing that really kind of juvenile women really like is to be able to hurt somebody, to be able to beat down the beta guy. And sometimes that happens. You're right. So sometimes shame can be malicious. Particularly if you're in high school or you're in junior high school, women will, like little girls, will use shame on guys because it's really just sort of a confirmation between them all. It's almost like shame from women of guys is like when they're, you're in junior high or high school, it's like bullying. You should be ashamed of yourself. I'm sure we hear this stupid schoolyard thing. I think if there's a defense to that, then it's just like walking away. I'm just saying it's hard to have that Teflon ego, particularly when you're young and you have no confidence and whatever. and then building yourself up. I think really, this is going to sound really stupid and motivational, but you need to take that energy and use it to better yourself. And Chad Worthington and his dog Spot. Dun, 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 dun. What else is here? Chad Worthington. All right. And then I'm going to do this one. Okay. Chad Worthington says, when a woman shames a man, she can ruin his reputation. She can tell other women, which will hurt his future opportunities, classmates, coworkers, whether the gossip is true or not. Okay. So there's a difference between that. That's an attack. Okay. It doesn't really necessarily have to be shame. I mean, shame could certainly be a part of it. And yes, you're right. Especially in this day and age, in our new order, in our new technological information society, our globalized new order, yes, shame can be weaponized. You're 100% right about that. And in some ways, there's not a lot of defense about that. In fact, it doesn't necessarily even have to come from women. It can come from guys as well. SJWs are fantastic about that. They use shame to shame your employer to fire you, or to question your sexuality, or question your judgment by shaming you. And again, this is it's not so much shame as it is just sort of spurious accusations. So yeah, shame is definitely a part of that, but understand that the underlying purpose of that is to attack you. So yes, you can weaponize shame. And a hairy butthole will finish us off. He says, what is Rollo Tomassi's opinion on postnatal depression? Is there like a red pill, so to speak, a definition of what's going on? I don't think ovulatory shift contained that much. No, it doesn't. It's not about ovulatory shift. Postnatal depression is, remember that when, this is just me reading, I'm going to just give you what I think. I'm not an expert in this, but I will say this, is that when a woman has her child as part of her body, and now that part of her body is out, there's that separation. People say, well, there's separation anxiety, there's postnatal depression that comes because there's that separation between. Sometimes women have to think, oh, I don't want to be away from my child. Remember that there's a lot of chemicals that are going on in a woman's body at that time. Oxytocin is one of them, but there's progesterone. There's all kinds of stuff that go along with. That's not just sure there's a psychological element to it, but again, what does that serve? Why would a woman be depressed about that? Because it promotes her, evolutionarily speaking, it promotes her to be connected and to nurture that child, to get to the point where being separated from that child is physically hurts her, like psychologically and physically hurts her when she's separated from that child. What is that? It's a survival mechanism is what it is. The women who got postnatal depression went on to, because they cared enough to nurture that child and put the genes on into the next generation. That's pretty simple, actually. And then finally, Alex File says, thank you, Rollo. Answer my question perfectly. I will apply this next time I'm out. Good for you. And no more. I'm not going to answer anymore. You can give me $100 and I won't say a word. Anyways, so guys, I'm glad we got together. I'm going to try to, like I said, I'm going to try to do something Friday. It's going to be either a live stream or I might record something and do a one-off kind of thing. So, and Sam, thanks for tracking all that good stuff for me today. Let's see. There we go. That's it. Let's see. Rule 0. I'm not hosting. I think it is Ryan's turn. That will be on Saturday at 11:30 a.m. I'm fairly certain that's it. Body language mastery that I talked about last Sunday. I'm going to be doing a few of these. I'm not sure when, but I'll let you guys know when I'm going to be in the chats and to talk about that for the program that John is doing. I agreed that I would go do at least a couple of those. I might do a few more to see how it goes. It is very popular. I was very surprised at the turnout and the response to that. So that's it. I will see you guys also. My next live stream at least will be Sunday at the same time, 1:30 p.m. Pacific, 4:30 Eastern. I hope you guys like this. I hope this helped you out in some way. So I will see you guys again. Thanks a lot.